You call yourself a man? You know you're a lying, low-life, motherfucking gambling degenerate prick. You know that's what you are?
Well, hello, you degenerate fucks, and welcome to the Degenerate Gambler. It is a Wednesday, the 18th of February. Just here with another episode looking back at last week, which is I'm coming up on 3 weeks now without a bet up. So had that really good run between Christmas, Boxing Day and New Year's Eve, where I got about 6 bets up. I haven't really got any bets up since then. A couple of wee small ones, just messing about with a few pound from thing, but nothing that I've posted. So I'm in a bit of a rut. Let's hope this week we can get a winner and get ourselves back on track. So I'll quickly run through last Saturday's bets. So I did a bet build, had a free bet builder on the Manchester Derby, which didn't do, wasn't great. First half was pretty poor. Did have that epic odds on William Hill. I got £20 back, so it was tenner profit. But the main bet was Sheffield United, who won. Stevenage were 1-0 up. They drew one each. Leyton Orient drew nil each. Woking won, and St Albans, having led twice in the game, got beat 3-2. The overs was pretty terrible. Had Forest and Leicester, which was 2-0. Middlesbrough Millwall was only 1-0. Salford Sutton was 2-0. Spennymoor Bradford PA, that was up. And then Farnborough Havant Waterlooville was called off. So not really even a sweat there. Evening bet, I think it was robbed. So I had Lecce and AC Milan both to score was up. Brentford to win was up. Leyton Orient, Marseille and Lorient both to score, that was up. I had Lyon and Strasbourg over two, that was up. And then I had Inter Milan to score more than one goal. And if anybody saw the game or the highlights or whatever, they were 1-0 up. And Martinez, the Argentinian, was through on goal. He turned the defender. The defender stuck his arm out and fell over. And they gave a free kick, which was, it was never a free kick. Martinez then went on to do a lovely wee chip finish. And do you know what? When I went in, I was watching the game. The cash out came up on Bet365, and I hesitated for a second. By the time I hit it, it had already suspended. That has happened to me before, where I've took the money and then they end up taking the money out of your account, but I would have just whipped it out and then just, you know, not went on Bet365 for a couple of days, and usually they always give you it back because it's their fault. But yeah, I felt like that would have been nice. It wasn't the biggest bet. I think I was only paying like 80 quid, but it would have been nice to get some sort of win, given that I haven't really had anything decent since New Year's Eve. Sunday, Sunday I did a over 1.5, which wasn't great. I only got 5 out of the 10 up. And my sort of main bet on Sunday was Monaco to win and over 1.5 goals was up. Feyenoord to win was up. Fenerbahce to win was up. Antwerp over twos, it was 2-0. And Newcastle both to score. Kind of robbed in that game too. If you saw, obviously Mitrovic's penalty for Fulham was disallowed. Never seen that happen before. Obviously, it's happened before where people have kicked the ball on their own foot, but with VAR, obviously now they're able to tell that it definitely struck his other foot. So, Newcastle got up the other end, score about 5 minutes later. The bet still would have been beat because of the Antwerp game, but yeah, a bit of bad luck in that one. Now let's get on to the stats. Still haven't had a full weekend of fixtures to be able to get the full stats for the lower leagues, but this week will be, because I'm nearly sure this week there is 10 or 12 games in every league right down the National League South. So next week's will be interesting, but last week's was 10 Premier League games. There was 8 favourites and 2 outsiders, no draws. So there wasn't a single draw in the Premier League over the weekend. In the Championship, big for the Championship, there was 12 games, 7 favourites won, 3 draws, 2 outsiders. League One, there was 10 games, 6 favourites, 3 draws, 1 outsider. In League Two, there was 11 games, five favourites, five draws, and one outsider. I mean, five draws is pretty fucking big there. National League, there was only two games, both favourites won. In the National League North, there was eight games, four favourites, two draws, two outsider. And in the National League South, there was only six games, two favourites, one draw, three outsiders. So in total, that was 59 games. 34 favourites won, 14 draws, 11 outsiders. So that was 57%, which is actually very, very high for the amount of favourites winning. 57 is up there. You know, if you get 60, you're looking good. Usually most weeks it's around 45, 50 or so. So 57%, you know, there was definitely bets out there to be won. One thing I would say there was 14 draws is quite high. Um, Compared to only 11 outsiders win. So there was a lot of draws. Uh, so yeah, that's the stats on the amount of favourites that won. Now I'll go on to the overs. And I've been saying this for a while, but this year has been pretty bad for over goals. I don't know why it is, but the overs were Premier League 4 over 6 not, Championship 7 over 5 not, League One 4 over 6 not, League Two 2 over 9 not, National League 1 over 1 not, National League North 5 over 3 not, National League South 4 over 2 not. So in total, out of 59, that was 27 were over and 32 were not. So that was only 45%. So again, not great. Um, so move on to my bets for this week. Look, I've placed my main bet. I'm hoping that looking at the games that I've picked, most of these should be on. I know the weather's pretty bad. I don't think it's due to get any worse. So most of these teams are going to have 3 or 4 days to make sure the pitch is ready. But you know, sometimes I do the bet on Wednesday and I place it on Wednesday because of odds shorten. Um, Sometimes they actually go up, but anyway. But sometimes the reason I do it is because if I like the price of the bet when it's finished, then I'll place it. Because if it's maybe like today's is 12 to 1. If I leave that for a few days, it may end up being about 10 to 1. You know, and then you've kind of lost 20 quid there and thing. But you always run the risk, especially at this time of year, of the matches being called off. I've had bets where I've had 3 games called off, 2 games called off. Last night's bet, a game called off, and even last night's bet. If you saw last night's bet, I waited until the teams were out. So the teams in all games had been out and published on social media, on the team's Twitter pages and on Fly Score. And then I picked my bet, and then I go back 15 minutes later, and one of the games is called off. So I mean, I think it was the Kings Lynn game. Can't remember the other team they were playing, but they both teams were obviously at the ground. Fans would have been arriving because it was basically 45 minutes before kickoff to call the game off. So to me, that's poor because you know the referee's supposed to be at the game. I think 2 hours before. He should have inspected that pitch and said it's not viable to play, and you know so the clubs can get the message out to tell the fans not to come, tell the away fans to turn around, and tell the team boss that there's no point coming. So yeah, that was a bit poor last night I felt, but it happens. You get postponed games, but so I'll quickly run through the bet, give you the prices, and then I'll go back for the reasons for each selection. So, first team is Watford. Watford are at home to Rotherham. It's 11 to 20, which is 1.55. Next team is Plymouth at home to Cheltenham. They're 8 to 15. That's 1.53. Sheffield Wednesday at home to Fleetwood. 2 to 5. That's 1.4. Stockport away to Crewe. 7 to 10. That's 1.7. And then a big price here, Colchester at home to Gillingham, 13 to 10. That's 2.3. And say that is 12 to 1 for the 5 of them. Also, Bet365 have a bit of a bonus on it, but you know, just if you're not betting with Bet365, it should be around 12 to 1. So now I'm going to give my reasons. So, say the first team there was Watford. Watford home to Rotherham. Watford currently sitting third. They had been on a bit of a bad run, but sort of patchy. Rotherham down in 19th. They're actually only 4 points away from being in the relegation zone. On current form, as I said, Watford only 9 points in the last five and Rotherham four. But Watford at home recently, they've only got two wins. As I said, it's patchy form. They beat Blackpool in their last game. They lost to Millwall, who's doing all right. They drew with Hull. They beat Reading and they lost to Coventry. They haven't played Rotherham since 2020, so those aren't really, those stats aren't really beneficial. But looking at Rotherham's away form, they've lost four in a row away from home and then drew the game before that. So they lost to Ipswich, lost to Millwall, lost to Huddersfield, lost to West Brom, and they drew with Luton. So again, home form there, and again, Watford have a great squad. They just can't get that consistency. So let's hope that they can get that on Saturday. Next, it was Plymouth at home to Cheltenham. Plymouth currently top of League One. Cheltenham down in 18th in form. Plymouth are third, 11 points from five. Cambridge, Cheltenham only 3 points from five games. In the recent home and away form, Plymouth have three wins, a draw, and a defeat. So they beat MK Dons in their last home game. They beat Wickham. They drew with AFC Wimbledon, but it went to penalties. That must have been the EFL Cup or EFL Trophy. They won the game anyway in penalties, but it was a draw at 90 minutes. They beat Morecambe and they lost to Port Vale. Now Plymouth did have that wee blip uh, a while ago there, but they seem to be sort of back on form looking at those results. Cheltenham's away form, two losses, a win, a loss, another win. So they lost their last away game to Morecambe. They lost to Bristol Rovers before that. They beat Shrewsbury. They lost to Forest Green and they beat Charlton. So that is their last five away. Next, I go to Sheffield Wednesday. Sheffield Wednesday are they second in the league? Yep, they're second, 3 points behind Plymouth with a game at hand. Uh, Fleetwood are 17th. Form Derby are top in the form table. Sheffield Wednesday are second, actually joint points, 13 points from five games. Fleetwood 6 points from five games. When we look at the recent home and away form, Sheffield Wednesday have four wins and a draw in their last five. So they beat Newcastle in the Cup last week, which was a big result. They beat Cambridge 5-0 the week before. They beat Port Vale 2-0. They drew with Oxford and they beat Mansfield. That's their last five at home. Fleetwood's away form is decent too. So they beat Shrewsbury 3-0. They lost to Barnsley. They beat MK Dons. They drew with Ipswich. And they beat Ebbsfleet. That would have been in the cup. So a decent, that's pretty decent for a team that's so far down the table to have, uh, basically three wins away from home in their last five. But again, my thinking there is home form. Sheffield Wednesday pushing for the league. They want to get promoted. They're only 4 points ahead of Ipswich, who are third, and there's only the top two goes up automatically. So, they need to keep winning if they want to get promoted. Next is Stockport. A lot of people had, including myself, thought Stockport would do well this year in League Two after getting promoted from the National League. And they started off really poor, but are currently sitting in 10th on 37 points. Crew, who they play, are 17th, only 7 points behind them. But when you look at form, Stockport are top of the table in form, so they seem to be getting their act together and getting some wins. So they've got 12 points from 15 from five games. Crew have only got five. And we look at the home and away form. So Crew's home form it's decent. So they've got two wins, a draw, and two defeats in the last five. They drew with Wimbledon in their last home game. They beat Tranmere, lost to Carlisle, lost to Newport, and beat Colchester. Stockport's away form, they have one defeat, three wins, and a draw in their last five. They lost their last away game against Grimsby. They beat Walsall before that, beat Hartlepool before that, drew with Charlton before that, and beat Newport before that. So as I say, I'm just really looking at a form in general there in the last sort of five, away form versus just general form. Lastly, then we go to Colchester, another League Two side. and I said it was the big price, 13-10. Colchester are currently 19th in the league. Gillingham are bottom and 24th. There is 9 points between the two of them. So you would look at that and go, maybe, both struggling. But again, when we go to form, last 5 games, Colchester 12 points and Gillingham have 3 points. So Gillingham have 1 win and 5. Colchester have got 12 points and 5. Um, Looking at the form, as I say, Colchester's home form, they've 2 wins, 2 draws, and a defeat in the last 5. They beat Swindon in their last home game, lost to Wimbledon, lost to Bristol Rovers. They beat Doncaster, and they drew with Stevenage. Gillingham's away form, 3 defeats and 2 draws. They lost to Stevenage, lost to Sutton, lost to Wolves, lost to Dagenham and Redbridge, and lost to Crawley. The win that they did have was in their last game. They beat Hartlepool. That's the first points, the only points they have in the last 5 games. And again, Hartlepool are down there in 23rd beside them. So it was, it was a game against, it was basically 2 poor teams. So as I say, that's it. That's the main bet, 12-1. Maybe you'll get it a bit better if you're someone else, but Bet365 is usually the best. Going on to the overs. Um, and this week, you know what? I'm gonna look at because the overs have been poor. Maybe some people are looking at how I pick them and stuff, and sort of wondering why I'm picking games. But I'll go through them this week, and I'll give you the reasons why. So Leicester Brighton is the first one, which is 4-5, and it's 1.8 in decimal. Um, in the form table, now I'll go over these and I'll give you some instances of what I'm looking for. So Brighton have scored 13 and conceded 8 in the last 5. Leicester only scored 3 and conceded 8, so that's not great. Normally that would put me off, but as I say, at the minute it's getting really, really hard to uh, just find those teams that are conceding and scoring in the same game. It's definitely the worst season that I remember in a while for over twos. So, but when you look at the results here, so Leicester lost 2-0, lost 2-0, won 1-0, lost 1-0, lost 2-1. So not great. Only one of those games over 2.5, but two of them also won 2 goals. Brighton won 3-0, won 5-1, won 4-1, won 4-2, or sorry, lost 4-2, won 3-1. So there's last 5. Every game has been over. And in games against each other, if we go back to even 2021, 2 years ago, they had 3 of the last 4 over twos, and the other one was 1 each. So again, that history there, hopefully that comes into play with that game. Next is Southampton versus Villa. So when you look at the league form table, Villa scored 8, conceded 6. Southampton scored 5, conceded 10. So Southampton are basically scoring a goal a game, conceding 2. Villa are scoring just under 1, or just under 2, and conceding just over 1. When they look at the head-to-head and the fixtures, so Southampton's last 5: win 2-1, win 2-0, win 2-1, lost 1-0, lost 2-1. So what's that? 3 over, 2 not, and one of the ones that wasn't was a 2-0 win against Man City, which you would have expected to be overs. Villa's is win 2-1, lost 2-1, draw 1 each, win 2-0, win 3-1. So 4 out of 5 there, or sorry, 3 out of 5 overs, and the other 2 both 2-0 or 2 goals. Games against each other earlier in the season, it was 1-0 Villa. They've also got a 4-0 there earlier in the season. Last year, both games were 1-0, so that's not encouraging. But as I say, I'm looking there mainly at, this is my thinking of Southampton's last 3 games. They've won all 3, they've scored in all 3, and they've conceded in 2 out of the 3. So that's kind of my thinking with that one. Next, I go down to League. Is it League One or Championship? Championship, yep. Wigan versus Luton, and Wigan versus Luton is 6-5, which is 2.2. Big price. Form in that, Luton scored 10, conceded 7. So that's pretty fucking good. Wigan scored 5, conceded 15. So they're conceding 3 goals a game and scoring roughly 1. So last 5 games, Wigan's not going great. Lost 2-1, draw one each, draw one each, lost 4-1, lost 4-1. Luton, win 2-1, lost 3-2, draw one each, win 2-1, win 3-0. So, again, the Wigan games that were under were one each. And the same goes for the Luton when they drew, or Luton drew one each with, uh, sorry, Luton's game, sorry, they had 4 of the 5 over, and the one game that they drew one each was against Wigan. They also have a game against Wigan there, which was 2-1. Is that an FA Cup game? Yeah. So they beat them last night, that was, in the FA Cup 2-1. So again, that's my thinking on that one. There's a game there that was played recently. It was 2-1. Luton were away from home. They're away from home at the weekend. Uh, just I'll show you something that I was looking at there. So in the championship at the minute, um, the championship's actually going okay for goals, but there's a game that jumped out, a team that jumped out at me. Swansea scored 12, conceded 8 in their last 5, but they're playing away to QPR, who have only scored what was that, 4? So they've only scored 4 and conceded 6 in their last 5. So do you know what I mean? It's like I'm a betting there for Swansea to win 3-0. Are Luton going to score, or is it going to be, So that's what puts me off some of them. But anyway, go to League One, and we have Bristol Rovers versus Wickham. It's 10-11, which is 1.91 in decimal. Bristol Rovers, and I've said this before, League One recently has been barely any teams are scoring 10 um, in 5 games, which is kind of what you're looking for. At the minute, there's a few teams that have done that. That's changed in the last couple of weeks. There's a few teams scoring, but of these 2 teams, Bristol Rovers scored 8, conceded 10. Wickham scored 6, conceded 3. I mean that isn't great, but as I say, so looking at Bristol Rovers 2-0, 2-0, 2-1, 2-1, 4-3. So 3 games over, 2 not over, and the 2 not over were 2 goals. Wickham is lost 1-0, won 3-0, lost 1-0, 1-2-1, won 1-0. But the last 2 games against each other were 2-1 and 3-1. So that's kind of my thinking there. And then lastly, we go into the National League North, and it's Scarborough versus AFC Fylde. So Fylde scored 10, conceded 3. Scarborough scored 10, conceded 12. We go to the head-to-head and have a look at that. So Scarborough 3-2 win, 2-0, 5-2, 3-2, 2-1. Fylde 1-0, 2-1, 5-0, 1-0, 2-1. So there you go. The Scarborough games 4 out of 5 over 2. The Fylde games 3 out of 5 over 2. Then the other 2 were both 1-0. But one was at home, one was away, so there's no real way to look at that. That's just a game that I think Scarborough will score. If Fylde score, then you've got a sweat. So that is the bets. That one is 27-1. So it is. So 5 on that'll pay decent. I'll pay about 135. Oh, excuse me. Looking ahead to next week. Um, Again, no full fixture lists. Tuesday and Wednesdays. Tuesday's not bad. Wednesday's terrible. Thursday's even worse. So there's a game in the championship. There is 9 League One games, 6 League Two games, 11 National League games, 6 National League North, 5 National League. Oh, sorry, 6 National League South. There's an FA Cup game, AFL Cup. There's 4 Bundesliga games. There's a game in Serie A. There's 6 Northern Premier League games. So I think there's some Dutch games on that night too. So that's enough for a bet. There's enough there to get you enough games to get you selection for sort of a 4 or 5 timer bet. Wednesday, not so much. So Wednesday there is a National League game. There's another EFL Cup game, 5 Bundesliga, and 5 Dutch games. That's it. So you've really only got 12 games. So probably no bet that night. And then Thursday's even worse. You just have a few Dutch games. So I think the Champions League's back soon. And I'm sure in the nights that there's Champions League, there'll be Championship, League One, League Two. Because we're what are we now? Probably close to being halfway into the season or just over. So there's going to be a lot of midweek games. There's going to be Champions League games. So I'm sort of keeping my powder dry with midweek bets. I did one last night. I might do one tonight. But I'm not going to go mental when there's not enough games on. I'm not going to rush selections and push selections that I don't fancy. And listen, at the minute, even if I do fancy them, some of them aren't coming in. So anyway, that's it for this week. Just leaves me to say, if you are doing a bet, good luck and happy punting.
Here, get the fuck out of here. Yeah, thanks. Let me find out you fucked up. I'll leave you wherever I find you.